What is up, everybody, and welcome to CTW Live. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo. Alongside of me today, Nick Franco.
We're back.
And Franco, we are officially back on the live
What?
airwaves.
What
It feels like it's
is
been a
this
long
like?
time.
I
Feels
know
like
it's
it's been a
like.
long time, but it really
I
hasn't
know
been.
it. I mean, we've probably had to deal with each other for for hours on end, doing all of our other work. Shout out to Celtics Nation Rise. They've been killing it over there with the fan series and all of that. But this is the first time we're back on Celtics Talk Weekly to be talking about this off season and what we're going to be looking forward to with the rest of the season. For the off season moving ahead, and it's definitely a new outlook than we had going in from last year. So definitely a couple of new things to touch up upon.
Yeah, and the lives too. Everything we've been doing as of late, recording. The lives I feel like are a little more intimate with
Yeah,
the
we get to
viewership, right?
engage with these lovely two people who are already in here.
Exactly, but we know, but throughout the season too, it's like with post game live, it's kind of the it's kind of the meat of the program, right? It's like post game live throughout the season. We go live. It's an event every single time, and unfortunately, the event we're talking about today, as you guys see on the screen here, Jaylen Brown. The news came out just the other day, or just yesterday. Jaylen Brown underwent arthroscopic surgery on his right knee and is expected to be ready for the 2025-26 training camp. And of course, Jaylen Brown, to give a little bit of context to this and backstory, Jaylen Brown, after the season was over, we knew Jaylen Brown was dealing with a knee injury throughout the back half of the regular season and then into the playoffs. But after the season concluded for the Celtics, a news story came out from ESPN about Jaylen Brown dealing with a torn meniscus, and he was supposed to be reevaluated within the first week of the offseason for the Celtics. It's not clear whether or not he was actually reevaluated. He might have been reevaluated in that first week. Nothing came out in terms of public info as to what direction Jaylen Brown or the team went in at that point in time. But we know now, about a month later, Jaylen Brown now underwent arthroscopic knee surgery to address that torn meniscus in his right knee, in which he was dealing with for the back half of the regular season, really the last 20 games of the regular season, and then the 11 games in the playoffs. And Jaylen, of course, opts to get surgery. The team, it's very unclear what the direction was between the team and Jaylen, what who had the final say and everything, and the final sway. Obviously, Jaylen is going to have a lot of say in what he wants to do with his own health, but the team doctors have a say as well within their own opinions. But at the end of this, Jaylen Brown does undergo surgery, and we'll get into the meat of all of that as we go on into the show. But here's Jaylen Brown from his Instagram story, and this was shared a lot on Twitter as well. Jaylen Brown with his grandpa. Shout out to all the great grandpas out there. I have a kick ass grandpa. Jaylen Brown has a kick ass grandpa. Shout out to all the grandpas out there as we
Well,
get into June and as we further
Father's Day weekend
approach
coming up.
Father's Day. Exactly, Franco. Exactly. Father's Day is on the horizon. So a great pic. I want to say great picture here, JB and his pops or his grandpa here, but it's within unfortunate circumstances. I'll say that. It's definitely within unfortunate circumstances. Great picture, but unfortunately for Jaylen Brown, not in the best of settings. And this, of course, was Jason Tatum at the end of the season. And we all know what happened when Jason Tatum tears his Achilles. He's in the hospital bed. And unfortunately, it leaves both of the Jays in hospital beds at the end of the season, and how quickly things can change. At the end of the 23-24 season, Brown and Tatum ended the season holding up the Larry O'Brien trophy. Now, at the end of the 24-25 season, both find themselves in hospital beds and now rehabbing from pretty major injuries. I mean, anytime you have to have surgery to repair an injury, that's a pretty major injury to go through and rehab. So both Brown and Tatum in those hospital beds, and just a terrible sight for Celtics Nation in general. However, it's the reality of the situation in which Celtics Nation now faces with the news of Jaylen Brown undergoing surgery on his torn meniscus just weeks after Jason Tatum underwent surgery, just 12 hours after tearing his Achilles at MSG in game 4. But Franco, obviously we see the news on Twitter and we see the news over the airwaves. What were your initial thoughts when you saw the news pop up? Jaylen Brown finally received surgery on his torn meniscus. It was very unclear whether or not he was actually going to go through with surgery or if it was going to heal on its own, but we see he did go through surgery. What were your initial thoughts on the surgery and that news coming out?
I was looking at the end of the sentence more than the front end of the sentence, which is ready for training camp. This was something that, as Celtics fans and people who have covered the team, we have known that this Jaylen Brown knee injury has been lingering. Even had it might not be the same injury, but we've known that he's been dealing with lower body injuries in other parts of his career. So being able to see that the su- surgery was successful is a huge step for the Celtics. Looking forward to their plans for next season because there we went live once this when this news first broke. When we first found out after the New York Knicks series that this injury existed, and we didn't know if we were going to have Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum on the court for opening night, which would be probably the worst ideal situation for the Celtics. But having Jaylen Brown healthy and having him back for training camp is great. And then that also gives me that comfort that he's not going to be coming back in the middle of the season when the team is already in full swing. He's going to be able to train with these guys. Obviously, there's going to be some acquisitions happening this offseason. We're going to see guys moving around. We're going to see Jaylen Brown be possibly coming back to nearly 7 different players that he hasn't played with in years prior. So being able to build up that chemistry during training camp, and hopefully we can see the injury not lead to any changes in his game. Obviously, Jaylen Brown being notorious for his ability to get to the rim and create opportunities on isolation looks and being able to get past the defender, getting into his own ranges, and his athleticism is really what was the main selling point when you're looking at what Brown can do for this team, being able to guard defensively nearly all 5 positions and being able to carry himself as a heavier set wing and help carry this Celtics team throughout the first half of next year. And it really poises as an opportunity for Jaylen Brown to prove himself, as the number one hypothetical question has always been, can Jaylen Brown lead his own team? We're going to be able to see that for at least the first half, if not the whole season next year. And I think that we're going to be able to see him take that more progressive step in his career. But surgery, not fun for anyone ever, whenever it happens. And it just is a testament to how beat up the Celtics team was coming into this playoffs. And uh, as we are known for saying, it's availability is the best ability. So looking at next year, you're looking at these guys, you're going to be looking for depth and durability. Players like Kristaps, Drew, they need to be able to stand by Jaylen Brown and be expected to play at least 60 games next year and be able to fill in and hold those sufficient roles. But now that he's back, that really kind of changes the perspective on the selling, like how people would like to see the Celtics sell, possibly even trade Jaylen Brown, because with those, I'm hitting a lot right now, but with those rumors that came out a few days ago from Shams, and we'll probably pull them up later. If this team is exploring the opportunity of trading Jaylen Brown, you are not trading Jaylen Brown right now at his highest value, if that is what this team is considering. You are going to try, if that is what people think is going to happen, teams aren't going to be looking at Jaylen Brown coming fresh off the hospital bed into their arena thinking that's going to make the change for their offense heading into or defense or their team next year. And it's you're going to see lesser deals. Obviously, the phones will stay open, but teams are going to try to take advantage of that, and they're going to try to use that as a selling point and being like, oh, we would give you more for Jaylen Brown, but if you look at his torn meniscus, we're going to be taking that risk. We're actually going to be doing you guys a favor by giving you guys healthy players instead of Jaylen Brown. But I think that riding out his injury and giving him this opportunity to take advantage of this team and to be able to bridge until Tatum is ready to come back. I think he is fully capable of it, and I more than just capable of it. I think that he is still him being fully healthy heading into next year gives this team a sense of hope looking at a playoff bracket and potential contention.
Yeah, where do I even start with this injury? Because it already started with the Tatum injury. That flipped the entire offseason on its head. And now Jaylen Brown, this injury, I think it does somewhat of the same because although he's going to be available to start training camp next year, this injury, along with Tatum's and primarily Tatum's, it leaves everything on the table for the Celtics. Ultimately, it leaves everything on the table, and I'll dive into that in a little bit here. But I just want to say this: the timeline of Jaylen Brown's injury leading up to this point a little concerning to me, because if you look at when we started talking about this injury, right? It was March. It's June. It was March when we started talking about this injury. It's been 3 months now we've been talking about Jaylen Brown's knee. How many more months are we going to talk about it? Are we going to talk about it next season? Is this going to be a Robert Williams type of thing? You know, that's one of the first thoughts that come to mind within Celtics Nation when we hear, oh, torn meniscus. The first two players I think of immediately, number one, Daniel Tice back in 2018, and number two, Robert Williams. Daniel Tice obviously had a little bit better of a time coming back from that, obviously with the 2020 run being the starting center on the Celtics Eastern Conference Finals team. Came back in that run, signed another good contract for himself at the $10 million range with the Rockets, and then he's with the Bulls, and he's with the Pacers. Obviously, with the Celtics traded him there after reacquiring him from the Houston Rockets, but. Daniel Tice, he tears his meniscus, not a huge deal. As for Robert Williams, that became a huge deal over time. And, there's a little bit more to say on that. But just the timeline right now of Jaylen Brown's torn meniscus, the first thought is a Robert Williams, a Daniel Tice. Now Jaylen Brown comes into picture as what's going to be the next steps for JB? What is he going to look like going ahead into the future? Robert Williams, when he sustained his torn meniscus, it was a 1 month thing. However, it became a basically 1+ year thing. I mean, he never really got back to his true form after he tore his meniscus. And if anybody remembers, he needed surgery in September. He had surgery in March of 2022, needed surgery in September of 2022 to readdress the swelling and discomfort in his knee. So is it going to be a situation like that, or is this going to be the last we hear of the knee with Jaylen Brown until training camp, until we're at media day and everybody's asking him about his knee and his health over the offseason? But because looking at the timeline right now, this all started back really in March, leading up to the Miami game where Jaylen Brown, that was, if you look at the last 16 games of the regular season, right? Jaylen Brown started to rack up DNP, just because of his knee injury. And it really started around the OKC Miami game mid-March. And the last game in which Jaylen Brown played over 30 minutes in, it was that OKC game. Jaylen Brown played 38 minutes that night, 37-59 that night. Jaylen Brown played 38 minutes against the Oklahoma City Thunder in a big game on ESPN. And that was the last game of the regular season in which Jaylen Brown played over 30 minutes. The last 16 games of the regular season, Jaylen Brown misses half of them, 50%. 8 games Jaylen Brown misses out of the last 16 games, plays in 8 games. But in all 8 games he plays under 30 minutes in each of the 8 games. Every single game played under 30 minutes. And what's concerning about that is the 8 games before, right? He played 8 of 10 games before the last 16 games. The 8 games before, he played over 30 minutes in all 8 games. So, last 16 games of his regular season, the first 8 all over 30 minutes, and then the last 8 all below 30 minutes. So something was going on at the end of the regular season. We were really speculating this down the stretch of the regular season. I remember us having conversations after the Wizards game, particularly after the Knicks game. That was the first game in which I don't want to say the first game in which we started raising concerns, but that was the alarm bells game to me. That was the, oh my goodness, the alarm bells are really going off with Jaylen Brown right now because number one, he looked hobbled on court, and number two, if you do a dissection of all the minutes that night, Jason, and this was a game in which the Celtics, they force overtime against the Knicks. They eventually beat the Knicks in overtime, play extended minutes in this game. However, Jason Tatum, he plays 47-44 that night. Derek White, he plays 42-45 that night. Kristaps Porzingis, 38-42 that night. Drew Holiday, 37-16 in that game. So 4 of the 5 Celtics starters, Tatum, White, Porzingis, Holiday, they all play over 35 minutes in an overtime game against the Knicks at MSG in game 79 of the regular season. Meanwhile, Jaylen Brown, he doesn't play down the stretch of the game. He doesn't play in crunch time, and he only plays 21-39. 21 minutes that night against the New York Knicks. Meanwhile, a player like Drew Holiday, who we're supposedly keeping on ice at the end of the regular season, he plays 37 minutes that night. 37 minutes on the floor for Drew Holiday, and Brown only plays 21. And that's when the alarm bells were really going off with Jaylen Brown, is that New York game. It looked hobbled, didn't play down the stretch, and the 4 of the 5 starters played over 35 minutes. Jaylen Brown plays 21. That made no sense. But then you look at the timeline afterwards, and it seemed as if Jaylen Brown, he missed the last 3 games of the regular season. Saw a little bit of rest going into the playoffs. In the playoffs, we thought, oh, that little bit of rest did something for Jaylen Brown. Oh, it did something for Jaylen Brown. Long story short, it did nothing for Jaylen Brown. Okay, literally did nothing. Like, from a visual standpoint, I feel like we all fell into the trap of placebo where, ooh, this player, he rested for 4 days. He's going to be better than he was 4 days ago. Theoretically, yes, that should be the case. But he was dealing with a torn meniscus the whole time. And Brad Stevens talked about it. Jaylen Brown, he maybe talked about it. I don't know if he's been in front of the media, but
don't think so.
but Brad Stevens, he talked about it at his end of season press conference. I don't think Jaylen Brown's spoken to the media since his torn meniscus, other than
I
his
don't
pop
I
up
don't think
shot
they do. Yeah,
with Malcolm
I don't think
Johnson.
I don't think they have the opportunity to speak to the media unless it's like through other podcasts. Any Celtics players, if you're interested in hopping on, we're more than
Exactly.
welcome.
I'm
If
like,
Jaylen
hey, if he
Brown, if
wants
you
to
want to let
come,
us know how your knee is feeling, we'll be sure to help you inform all of Celtics Nation on all of your updates.
exactly. But the point here was Jaylen Brown. He knew he had a torn meniscus. Like, if I forgot I forgot which program we're on and talking about this, but I said this a while ago. If Jaylen Brown was feeling discomfort in his knee in March, I don't think they tested him in March. I don't think they ran MRIs on him in
Right.
March. And he received injections on his knee in April. You don't think they found a torn meniscus way earlier on in time and let him play through it, let him decide whether or not to play through it, and he did, because Jaylen Brown played all 11 playoff games and he played 36.6 minutes per night. And this injury went from a posterior impingement to a bone bruise to a torn meniscus. And that's not necessarily saying that's the progression of the injury. That's how it was reported to us. It was first an impingement, it was then a bone bruise, then it was a torn meniscus, and now he's getting surgery to repair that torn meniscus. However, I do want to dive into the surgery, because the surgery part of this is very important when talking about Jaylen Brown and how his knee will be repaired. Because this has been a conversation in the past when it comes to specifically meniscus injury. It's, do you allow it to heal over time naturally? Do you get it repaired? Or do you essentially get part of it removed? That's basically your
Right.
3 options right there. You either have it repaired, you have it removed, not entirely removed, but just the damaged area removed, or you let it heal naturally? That's always the question. So when we saw Jaylen Brown, oh, he's being reevaluated at the end of the season, that was the determination. It was, is it going to be removed? Is it going to be repaired, or is it going to be healing naturally over time? And what we found out, according to the reports out there about Jaylen Brown's knee injury, Jaylen Brown underwent arthroscopic debridement surgery. Okay, so I'll keep it straight with the
Dr.
viewers.
Zarlingo.
I've never heard of debridement ever in my life before 7 a.m. this morning. For real. Never before. 6 a.m., not a word in my vocabulary. 7 a.m., found out all about it, looked it up on the internet, and here's what I got. Debridement. It's a type of surgery that removes dead or damaged tissue from an area in the body. And so in this case, if you relate debridement to the meniscus, it means part of the meniscus was removed. So we're talking about removed, repaired, or healing naturally. This was a removal surgery. So not a repair, but rather a removal, a shaving away of the meniscus, essentially. You can only shave away so much of the meniscus. I'll say
Until
that.
it's gone, yeah.
And that's the concerning part about all this, is that maybe his timeline of return is affected by all this. You know, if it heals naturally, maybe it's a 6-month timeline. If he gets it partially removed, maybe it's only a 3-month timeline, which we see right now, 3-4 month timeline. If he gets repaired, maybe it's an even longer timeline than that. I wonder if any of that came into the. I wonder if any of those scenarios came into play on which type of surgery or which type of route for which type of healing route Jaylen Brown went down. I wonder if any of those possibilities played a factor. Um, but removal definitely could
Not a fun.
mean that the meniscus was unrepairable. Which
Yeah.
I know we already asked this question later on in time, but we were talking about, did the playoff run make the injury worse? It's possible this type of surgery, the debridement surgery, the type of surgery that removes dead or damaged tissue, the removal, the shaving away of the meniscus, it's possible that indicates that Jaylen Brown's meniscus injury was so bad that it was essentially unrepairable, that they needed to do this surgery. But that's where I also bring up the other scenario of maybe the timelines had something to do with it. It's all speculation. The media, like we're just speculating on this. It could be about the timeline. It could be about the general state of Jaylen Brown's meniscus. We don't exactly know. It could be one or the other. Could be both. You never know. But you talk about shaving away part of that meniscus, bone on bone pain, that's possible in the long run. I mean, think about arthritis. I mean, if you look at we actually have diagrams up here. We actually have diagrams. We're going to be medical professionals here because that's what we do here in the NBA circle. We have to become medical professionals to understand these injuries. This is a diagram of any regular knee out there, and notice the meniscus, the lateral meniscus, the medial meniscus, and it's basically the padding in the knee, right? You look at all the ligaments connecting the knee. The padding is essentially the meniscus is essentially the padding. And shout out, by the way, to the Stedman Clinic and Ortho Info for these pictures right here, because this is another one. This one's a little more, you can see it a little bit better. But the meniscus is essentially the padding. Like you think about, the patella, that's your kneecap. And if anybody's feeling their knee, your patella, that's your kneecap. But then below that, you think about where that meniscus is. It's the shock absorbing padding within your knee between your femur and your tibia. Like the tibia, it's the I believe it's the bigger bone in the leg, if I'm not mistaken, right? Learning from the Hayward incident when Gordon Hayward broke his tibia, but the tibia, that's the big bone in your lower leg. And the femur, that's the big bone in your upper leg. And the meniscus, that's basically the padding in between those two bones. So if you rub away that meniscus or you're shaving away that meniscus over time, that padding is going to go away, and the possibility of arthritis becomes ever more exacerbated. Bone on bone pain becomes exacerbated, and I'll add this note in too. Arthritis can be a cause of bone bruising. Arthritis can be a cause of bone bruising, in which we saw Jaylen Brown sustain at the end of the season. Now, in my mind, bone bruising was essentially a ploy and a cover up for torn meniscus. They didn't want to give out torn meniscus, so they said bone bruise. But if it was in fact a bone bruise, arthritis can sometimes be the cause of bone bruises, and that's the main concern here with Jaylen Brown long term. That's the main concern. Is Jaylen Brown, is he going to be healthy going ahead into the future? Because we're talking about, is this going to be a repair? Is it going to be a removal? Is it going to be a natural? Like, is he going to go through a natural healing process? It's not going to be. It wasn't a repair. It's not going to be naturally healed. Those are usually longer
Right.
processes, right? They're usually. I'm just saying. I'm speculating this. Maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe they go, oh, we don't want you waiting 6 months, or Jaylen Brown doesn't want to wait 6 months. That's possible. The removal, shorter time period for recovery, but the long term implications, that's the thing here. The natural recovery, the repair, takes longer to recover from, but the long term is usually better for the patient. This is what I've heard in the past. I'm just with other players.
Yeah.
It's usually better long term for the patient. As for the removal, it's better short term for recovery, but long term, it introduces the possibility of arthritis, bone on bone pain. If you're shaving away part of your meniscus, you're shaving away part of that shock absorbing padding in your knee.
Right.
That is just fundamentally that's concerning to me. That's a little bit concerning if you look at the route in which Jaylen Brown and the Celtics took for this. And I'll say this too. You speculate this. It might have been unrepairable. This might have been the only thing to do. It could have been the only thing to
Yeah.
do. And I'll give out this view as well. They said he was going to be reevaluated within a week after the season was over. What happened to that? It's now a month after the season. I'm just throwing this out there. Maybe at first they were going, we'll let it heal. We'll see what the process looks like. 2, 3, even 4 weeks, right? And we'll see if you need surgery or not. Let's see how this is healing in 2, 3, 4 weeks, right? 2, 3, 4 weeks. Maybe it wasn't healing all that well. And they go ahead and do surgery now. 4 weeks later, after saying, oh, he's going to be reevaluated after 1 week, they may have let it go out 2, 3, 4 weeks to see how he was healing, to then determine what kind of surgery he was going to have. And at that point, if it was a little bit too severe or wasn't healing as quickly as they thought, maybe they go ahead and do the surgery. So there's multiple ways to look at this. I'm just going to say, regardless, it's never good when a player has part of their meniscus shaved away, and we don't know,
Right.
how big of a procedure this was. It could be very, very small amount, could be a lot bigger of a chunk. But regardless, Jaylen Brown, he's now a victim of a meniscus. What do they call it? I don't have the medical term, so let's use this one. The one I learned at 7 a.m. Debridement surgery. Jaylen Brown went through debride. That's the removal of part of the meniscus in terms of Jaylen Brown's case. But from your perspective, Franco, do you have concerns long term for Jaylen Brown after this injury? Think about the athleticism with Jaylen Brown, the explosiveness, the downhill attack. From your perspective, should we be concerned about Jaylen Brown moving ahead into the future?
Um, should we be concerned? Yes, it's something to definitely take note of, and looking at those different avenues of what could have happened when that diagnosis came through is, I think that I think that the Celtics are much smarter and much more conservative, and know that no player's health is worth putting out on the line for a better chance to win. If this injury was as bad as we are suspecting it to be, we would think that I would have absolutely no problem with the Celtics just shutting down Brown at that point. Joe Mazzulla, Brad Stevens, they are much smarter than that just to put a player out there who could be risking his career just to win another potential championship. And looking at what this team is going to go through with this injury is just the wear and tear on that knee surgery is concerning because if it was bad enough and he's like, screw it, we're going to just play through it anyways and we'll take care of it at the end of the season, there's a very high risk of not only just that injury getting worse, or it may be get to a point where it's irrecoverable, and that's where I think where the debridement, that's the word, the
Debridement, debridement,
debridement.
I'm not gonna. I'll be a straight shooter with the viewers as I always am. I didn't know about this word until 7 o'clock this morning. Straight up, 7 o'clock.
went to broadcasting school. What the hell do you expect from me? Like,
well, some of these medical terms, I'm like, who is wrong? Like, you guys got to be fixing humans. Like, you guys can't be going through all this vocabulary and all these vowels and these crazy terms. I mean, it's what's funny about it is it can usually be whittled down to something very simple in term. This is the two sides of the brain. You have the labeled side and you have the movement side. The movement is always very simple, and then humans like to make the labels very complicated. It's very fascinating, something that humans do. Totally off topic of Jaylen Brown, but totally on topic because we're talking about the medical field here.
Yes, exactly. And
kiss.
Yes, of course. And I think that for the debridement surgery, I think that had to be the best option on the table because you're not going to risk a player that is a half of a billionaire. Jaylen Brown is half of a billionaire at this point, and he owns $500 million of the Celtics salary money. So putting that at risk for further seasons is a very concerning idea, and I don't think that's the route this team went with. And I think that we're gonna see. I know Boston, obviously, just in general, Boston has some of the best medical buildings and best programs within the country, actually, even within the world. So he's getting top of the line treatment, and it's going to be really interesting to see what the updates are looking like from both the Jaylen and Jason. Are we going to be? I would think that we'd be seeing videos throughout this summer of them working out together and rehab together. They're going to be going through the same recovery or not the same recovery, but doing recovery at the same time. So that's going to be a benefit for them. But seeing the wear and tear and what it could possibly lead to, you look at other winged players that could be comparable to Jaylen Brown is a Paul George or a player of that stature that has dealt with a knee injury and they just weren't able to come back the same. I think that Jaylen Brown's athleticism is such a major part of what he contributes to a team that making sure that is taken care of and he's at 100% is the number one priority over anything. Like if it meant that this team was going into the season with Derek White being the best player on the team, then so be it. But I think that seeing the surgery, I never gonna speculate on it past saying that it looks good to go and doesn't, because I haven't seen any of the forms and like any of that and like if it was a successful surgery or not. But I'm very confident that Jaylen Brown is going to be able to return to the level of player that he was before. It's just going to be a matter of how durable and is that going to become an injury that can be re-aggravated as time goes on. As we've talked about, the long-term side effects of a debridement surgery is that potential bone-to-bone rubbing, and he goes up for a dunk one time and clicks knees with the player. That could be a very, very scary sight for him and could be a major setback. So it depends on how durable that knee is and how we're going to be able to manage those minutes, because Jaylen Brown is going to be relied on to be the number one option for the Celtics next year. And making sure that he is able to play at his best ability and at full health is the number one priority. I don't think, if this injury was a little bit more concerning, I would think that you would possibly see this team starting to have like a Luka Doncic moment and trying to get rid of Jaylen Brown and being like, yeah, here's Jaylen Brown. Here's Jaylen Brown. He's A-okay. Still the same player that he was before, when he absolutely isn't. So I don't see that being what's going on. So I just think that the Celtics in Boston is going to, and ownership and the front office is just going to play the patience game and also just building pieces around there to keep the boat afloat while they are recovering.
Now, long term, this injury for Jaylen Brown, I've already kind of mentioned it. It's definitely concerning to me. It's definitely concerning because Jaylen is somebody who relies on his athleticism, his quickness, his burst, his downhill attack to really get after teams on the offensive end of the floor. And then defensively, I mean, he's a purely athletic player on that end. He relies on pure athleticism to get it done. So if you're talking about Jaylen Brown, if you're talking about a knee hampering his ability to do any of that, it definitely puts a dent in his entire game. And that's where I asked the question of, could Jaylen Brown see a dip in production in general? Could it mean that he maybe has to change his game up a little bit? Does he look to become a little bit more physical, like we saw in the Magic series? We saw in the Magic series, Jaylen Brown, as that series went on, he just started bullying guys. I mean, he couldn't. He was a little stiff. We saw that throughout the playoffs. We witnessed Jaylen Brown's stiffness within that knee and just the immobilization of Jaylen Brown on the floor. We witnessed that with our own two eyes. In that series against the Magic, though, he found other ways to play and other ways to succeed, and one of those was being physical with the Orlando Magic. I wonder if he adds more of that into his game as the future rolls along. I do wonder, though, talk about being more physical. I do wonder, however, this is maybe a contradictory point. I wonder if he chooses to lighten up his weight a little bit. Because coming into the season, we can pull receipts on this, all right? Like, you pull receipts on your sixth man of the year.
I remember.
I'm trying to remember which game exactly. It was in
I think
December.
it was. I think it was even earlier than that. I think we were talking about this preseason, regular season, early on in the season. Early on, when we first saw Jaylen Brown arrive on the scene, we were saying that Jaylen Brown looked a lot bigger, not bigger in the in a heavier, out of shape sense. Just a much more built player, because when Jaylen Brown came into the league, we saw him mainly listed as a shooting guard. Now you can see him slot into that small forward position, and even during a small ball lineup, you can slot him into the four with how much muscle he's gained.
Yeah, and that's part of the point is just lightening up his weight might need to happen for he might need to lighten up his weight a little bit from the standpoint of last season. Came into the season, I don't I like on the Celtics Nation Rise podcast. I said, well, he came in a little overweight. Like, when I said overweight, I didn't mean obese. I didn't mean fat. It's not like he was sporting a Jamarcus Russell body or something like that. Nothing like that. However,
He
a lot of
looks like a
muscle mass.
linebacker. He looks
And
like a
with more
linebacker.
muscle mass means more wear and tear on those joint pads, on those joint ligaments, and potentially more tears within muscles, period. If you have more muscles, there's more potential for tears within the muscles. I mean, that's just basic 101 knowledge. It's common sense. And he comes into the season. Jaylen Brown comes into the season sporting this just crazy bodybuilder type of like he over the off season. That's why I kind of clown on the water workouts and what I'm like. Did the
Uh,
water workouts really create
Jaylen
that
Brown.
body? Like,
Jaylen Brown was who's that new guy that's trending all over the place? Ashton Hall, the guy who puts his face in the water. He went through the Ashton Hall off season last year.
well, whatever he did, he came back looking like a total action figure and looked the best he's ever looked in his entire career. I mean, 2024, the summer of 2024, that was JB's summer. Always look at it as the Celtics summer, but JB, he really won last summer in every aspect. I mean, every aspect. Hey, we don't know everything about JB in his personal life, but everything publicly, it seemed like he won pretty hard last year.
I think
Everything.
he was winning off the court too. I mean,
Exactly, on and off the court. That exactly on and off the court. But specifically with his body, he comes into the regular season as just this jacked warrior. I mean, he looks like Rambo out there. He looks like Sylvester Stallone and Rambo coming out onto the floor on opening night. And my first reaction was, this could potentially lead to more injuries later on down the line. It could. And how does Jaylen Brown end in the 24-25 season? With a torn meniscus, in which we talked about at the beginning of the season. When you add more muscle, there's more potential for wear and tear on the joint pads, the joint ligaments. There's more potential for tears in the muscle. And guess what happens? Oh yeah, one of those joint pads for Jaylen Brown doesn't work at the end of the season. Absolutely doesn't work. So Jaylen Brown comes into the season with more weight. I wonder if he looks to lighten up his weight a little bit, even though he might look to play a little bit more physical in the future. He still might look to lighten up his weight. I think that's just the smart choice when you're moving into your 30s period. If you look at the track record of players going into their 30s, it's better to have the slender body. I mean, Al Horford is a perfect example of that on the Celtics right now. He's become a little bit more slender. You look at him in Atlanta back in the early 2010s versus now, definitely a more slender player, a little bit more athletic of a player, and that's just all due to his training over time, his body mass, his weight, and what he's really focusing on when it comes to his physique. So Jaylen Brown, I'm just saying, muscle milk, Al Horford, maybe consult him just a little bit, but he might look to do that over time. He could be. I
wouldn't be
asked the
muscle
question
milk,
too.
would be
Could Jalen
Ojembe.
focus on becoming a more paced player? You
Right.
think about guys out there that have a little bit more pace in their game, who are a little bit more cerebral, who are a little bit more oriented towards playmaking. I wonder if Jaylen Brown could come out next season and maybe start implement with Jaylen Brown's playmaking. It's always and that's what's out of everything next season. The two things in which will really be on display for Jaylen Brown, it'll be number one his ability to create efficient shots off the dribble when he's running the offense, but number two, it's going to be his playmaking within the Celtics offense. Those are the two main things we're looking at with Jaylen Brown next season, next year as the main number one guy with Tatum out. Jaylen Brown, his playmaking has always been a little like there's always
Right.
been something more to be desired from Jaylen Brown's playmaking game. And he's made great strides, don't get me wrong, as a
Yeah.
playmaker over time. Surely he has. I mean, from where he was in
It just
2019
sometimes
as a
looks
role player
unnatural.
versus now, completely different. But I do wonder if taking over the offense next year as the number one guy, tasked with that specifically, maybe Jaylen Brown becomes a more paced player, a more cerebral player, like his playmaking becomes better over time, just from being the number one option, but also knowing he has to be more of this player now moving forward to find more success into his 30s. Thinking, okay, I'm not. If you're looking at it from Jaylen Brown's perspective, he's not going to be the likelihood with this injury and just the minutes Jaylen Brown played over the first 9 years of his career, the likelihood he's not going to be jumping out of the building the same way when he's 35 as he was when he was 24.
Right.
I mean, that's just the science of most humans, but specifically in this case where somebody's played heavy playoff minutes in the early portion of their career, now dealing with a torn meniscus, Jaylen Brown's going to have to switch up his style of play just a little bit. just the exact ways in which he'll do that are unknown at this point in time. They're all speculation. But Jaylen Brown might need to switch up his game a little bit to rely less so on that athleticism, less so on that burst, less so on that explosion, less so on that downhill attack. And that's what Jason Tatum ultimately might have to focus on too, which is just a
Yeah,
sad conversation to have considering both of these players were they were the most dominant duo in the East the last 2 seasons, and now we go into a conversation where they kind of look like the old guys,
yeah.
like Kawhi and
We,
PG did out west.
well, well, here's so we. I remember during All Star Weekend when we were like, why the hell is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on the OGs team? Like, why
Oh,
is
now no, now
yeah,
now they're really on the OG's team. I
yeah,
mean,
now
Jaylen Brown, he'll be 29
yeah,
next season. Tatum will be
they just
29
passed
when he
the
comes back, and
yeah, they just passed the OG team. Now they're a part of Team Monk. It's but oh, I just with Jaylen Brown carrying on the main frontal attack of the team and being the main point of focus and the number one priority for the team. We've seen him be able to do this in past games. It might have not been at the same sample size that we've seen out of Jason Tatum or anything of that sort, but I know that he is more than capable of doing so. I think the Celtics also have faith within him to be able to do it. If not, the Celtics would probably have as much rumors swirling about Brown right now as there are about Giannis and Durant. Because if they didn't think that Jaylen Brown was capable of manning this team heading into next year, and this injury was now the south side of Jaylen Brown's career and his tenure in Boston, we would start to hear a lot more conversations being built around, will the Celtics separate off of Jaylen and build a team more based around Tatum? But Brown is just as capable, and I think sometimes we've seen it look a little unnatural on the court. Sometimes when he's playing that number one role, it seems like it doesn't look as formal as you'd like it to. Sometimes he's playing a little bit more selfishly, and sometimes he doesn't have the confidence on the complete opposite side of the totem pole. Sometimes he doesn't have the confidence to be making those shots and creating those shot decisions that Tatum has been so good at and been able to make a career off of it and been able to add himself to MVP conversations and add the his assist totals to his game. So if Jaylen Brown starts to slow down his game and instead of just being that primary scoring option and being the face of the team, there is no doubt in my mind that Jaylen Brown can get this Celtics team within the top 8 seeds of the Eastern Conference and make a potential playoff contention.
And the beginning of next season is going to be interesting for so many reasons. Number one, the roster might look completely different, but number two, Jaylen Brown, if he's of course still on the roster come training camp and come opening night,
Which
which I anticipate.
I'm leaning extremely heavily towards, unless the San
Yeah,
Antonio Spurs are calling with the number 2 pick, Devin Vassell, just their entire future. We would need something that would make the Celtics feel stupid for declining.
but that's what makes the the opening night specifically and opening week next year of the regular season so interesting. We're going to get a lot of answers to our questions right now about Jaylen Brown, about how he's going to be manning the offense, what kind of changes come within his game, what level of health is he actually at when the regular season starts, because we've been through this with Porzingis last offseason. Porzingis, he talked about how last offseason, instead of going through his normal routine within the offseason, vacationing, coming back to training camp, getting that normal ramp up period, he was rehabbing. So this offseason, Jason Tatum, we know he's going to be rehabbing for sure, and he's not going. He'll be rehabbing for potentially the next two off seasons, essentially. But Jaylen Brown, in
Well,
particular,
until we get that Jason Tatum is out for the 2025-26, I'm going to leave it open ended on the timetable.
I'm not even. I'm not even considering it.
Prepare
It's one
for
of
the
those
worst
things
and
where I'm
hope for
like,
the
of
best.
course there's a percent chance, but it's something that I'm just like, we need to just come to a consensus and go, look, if he tore his Achilles in April, and no, not in April, in May of 2025. Why? Like, that is usually a year-long injury. So to me, I mean, and you got to think about the time period in which they're going to be bringing him back. You're going to be bringing him back during game 70. The last 10 games of the right, like that's just a dangerous time period to bring him back too, because teams are ramping up, going into the playoffs, playing their most intense basketball the entire not regular season, entire season, the tangible season between the regular season and postseason. The most intense basketball comes late in the year. So I do have major, like, that's the huge disconnect with Tatum coming back for me is there. If he's going to come back, he's likely coming back during the most intense time of the year when it comes to the play on court, and I don't see that really matching up. But Jaylen Brown, next season, we're going to see all the answers come out for Jaylen Brown. I mean, it's going to be opening night in the first week of the season. We're going to understand what his level of health is. We will understand what kind of role he'll carve himself out. Like, we know he's supposed to be the number one option on the team, but what exactly will
Does
that
that
entail
entail?
with the rest of the team? Because we know we have other ball handlers. We know the roster could look a lot different next season in general, and that's there's I will say the off season has to happen too for a lot of our questions to be refined
Yes.
over time, because it's not always, right now we think it's clear cut this way, but
We might have
a ball
Giannis on the
handler
team in
changes,
24
a
hours.
Ford changes, the roster complexity changes. That opening night might look a little bit different. Like, I do wonder, looking at Jaylen Brown's history, 8 turnovers in Game 7 of the 2023 Eastern Conference Finals. 8. Right? We all saw the highlight film, but Jaylen Brown with his left hand losing the ball. We all saw it. I wonder, looking at the history of that, 2023, I know he was great in 2024, but 2025, Jaylen Brown was up and down. I wonder if, looking at the history of Jaylen Brown as the main guy, as the playmaker, I wonder if the Celtics already know what's about to happen. Like, I wonder if they're going to anticipate that this offseason and make a chess move ahead of it, going, we already know the results of Jaylen Brown as the main guy. I know Jason Tatum's not been out too many games. He's been a very durable player, which makes his Achilles injury just ever more so devastating, as he never missed time, and now he's just going to miss an entire season in his prime. But even with Jason Tatum in the lineup, in and out the minutes, and Jason Tatum the games in which he did miss, maybe the Celtics see Jaylen Brown in those situations, or already saw Jaylen Brown in those situations, and they're looking at the situation this summer going, or at least they're the roster and what's transpiring next season with the rotation potentially. Maybe the front office goes, hmm, let's get ahead of this. Maybe let's get another ball handler on this roster. Or even
Yeah.
Joe Mazzulla next year goes, let's give more responsibility to Derek White. Maybe Drew Holiday's gone, Tatum's gone. Those are two main ball handlers off off the roster,
Pritchard might
out of
be
the
a contributor. Who
rotation.
knows?
Pritchard could
No.
ultimately step up and
Yeah.
receive more responsibility. I mean, I know you've definitely advocated for that before, and just say, like, it's not clear cut that Jaylen Brown is, well, how we're thinking about him is the role of Jason Tatum. That is the ideal scenario, right? Of Jaylen Brown in the future is he plays like Tatum next year, and I think there's a world out there in which that undoubtedly happens.
Hmm.
But there's also a scenario where Jaylen Brown is below that level. He's not reaching that efficiency, and the team starts to play more as a team. Pritchard more opportunity. Derek White more opportunity. Maybe the team brings in another ball
multiple
handler.
double-digit scorers on a gamely basis.
And it could really happen. And that's why these injuries, it just kind of opens the door to really everything that could potentially happen this summer, including a Jaylen Brown trade. That could potentially happen. That could be on the table. And that's what I want to get into right now is should the Celtics trade Jaylen Brown? That is the key question right now going around because there have been reports, there have been rumors on the Pat McAfee show the other day. Shams Charania, this is what Shams Charania had to say on the Pat McAfee show the other day. Are teams making big offers and calling about Jaylen Brown and Derek White? 100%. The Celtics prefer not to trade Derek White and Jaylen Brown, from my understanding. But listen, if they get a big offer, they have to look at everything. And I think they're going to get, offers on the three guys that they're focused on. They're going to get offers potentially on Derek White and Jaylen Brown. And I think between now and the draft and free agency, they're going to evaluate what makes sense from a value perspective. A value perspective. It's always important to add in what the perspective of value looks like from either side, whether it's the Celtics or even another team receiving return from the Celtics. But even more rumors here. Boston is reportedly focusing on trades involving Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and Sam Hauser. No surprise there. We've been talking about it for over a month now. But teams are also calling about Jaylen Brown and Derek White. Everybody but Tatum seems to be on the table, and that's what Chris Mannix reiterated while he was on the KOC podcast or a podcast with KOC on Yahoo, Kevin O'Connor, that is. Most recently, I've heard they're open to trading anybody except for Tatum, Chris Mannix said. So a Jaylen Brown trade, not completely implausible. Okay, I'll say that right now. It's
Yeah.
And for me, I'm on your side, Franco. I'm on the side of I don't see him moving. I
No.
really don't see him moving because if you look at Jaylen Brown, okay, the obvious answer to trading him is no. An advantage of having Jaylen Brown is if Jason Tatum doesn't come back exactly the same player, Jaylen Brown is a hedge and a counter against that. If Jason Tatum doesn't come back the same player and just isn't his same Tatum self, can't get downhill, can't shoot the ball, whatever it is, right? Can't get to his spots. Jaylen Brown is a counter against that, knowing, okay, Jaylen Brown, we're gonna have to see this is the rough part about the Celtics. We're gonna have to see what Brown and Tatum both look like after their injuries. Like
Yes.
Brown could equally look as bad, who knows?
Yeah. Who knows?
But
We might be double screwed.
exactly. But Brown, he's dealing with a lesser, and I hate to say lesser because a torn meniscus and a torn Achilles, like you tear anything in your lower leg, it's bad. But a torn meniscus is generally seen. Obviously, he's not. Jaylen Brown's going to be ready
I mean,
by
look at
next
the
season.
timeline. Yeah.
Yeah, Tatum's not going to play next season. Yeah, exactly. Look at the timelines of the two injuries. Little lesser of an injury. It's possible later on in time Tatum doesn't come back the same, and Jaylen Brown, he ends up as the number one guy. He winds up as the number one guy in the long run, and that's the Celtics counter to Tatum. Now he's not worth he's not actually worth what we thought he was, or he's not the same player in which he was in the past. He's not worth the same value in which he was in the past. Jaylen Brown, if he's healthy, if he's ready to go, if he this next season goes well with Jaylen Brown as the number one guy, maybe he's just the number one guy in the future. That does start to look a little wonky of how does Tatum come back into the rotation? How do those two start playing together again? What two supermax contracts and Tatum used to be the main guy, but now he's the second guy, and he's clearly not if he's the second guy, is he a guy anymore? But having Jaylen Brown on the roster is a hedge against that. And I would say JT and JB are a little bit redundant towards each other. It'd be nice to see what Jaylen Brown actually looks like next season as the number one guy. Just point blank, it would be great to see a full season of Jaylen Brown take over the reins of the Celtics.
If you're looking to trade him, I'm not saying trade him now, but if you're looking at the the idea of moving on from one of them, next year is one of the best advertisements you can use for Jaylen Brown, if that even is the case, which I don't see it being. I see if the Celtics move on from Jaylen Brown, that is them basically shutting the window on any potential ability to compete next year unless they are getting a star caliber player like a Giannis in a trade or something of that sort, which I don't like to entertain that. I just don't think it's it's pointless. It would be the Celtics limiting themselves to how important is next season to the Boston Celtics compared to the next 10 years under a new owner. That's what is completely making me like turn away from any ideas of this team making any adjustments that keep this team in the win now category with Jason Tatum out of the lineup. Obviously, keep Jaylen Brown around. You're going to have that maintenance and also that counteracting part to Tatum, because having two players that are so have played so long and so well together over the past few years, it would be very challenging for me to see a reason why the Boston Celtics would want to move on from him, other than this injury being something that is much worse than what is shown to the public. And reading that Shams Charania uh, that report and seeing Derek White and Jaylen Brown, I could have came up with that report off the top of my head. No, it's like a no shit Sherlock type of moment. Whenever I read one of these sources say one of these trade rumors, it's like, oh, well, they no shit. Like, they are going to end up needing to make moves. And oh, who if you were an NBA GM, who would you be interested in on the Boston Celtics? Derek White and Jaylen Brown? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's very they think they're on to something when it's all just real common sense when it comes to these types of ordeals. And yes, the Brad Stevens wouldn't be in the front office chair right now if he was seeing a phone call coming from the San Antonio Spurs and hitting the decline button because he already knows what they're going to ask for. Like, it's that's not what any these situations are going to be. And yes, obviously those phone lines are going to be open for those types of players like Derek White and Jaylen Brown, but a team needs to be ready to sell their soul like the Brooklyn Nets did when the Celtics moved on from Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett in that trade. And I think that it's going to be very hard to find a team to do it. I would consider maybe, and even I don't like this idea because I don't see the Celtics re-entering a rebuilding process just because of the Jason Tatum injury and drafting a young star. The names that have been thrown out, the top three picks, Flag, Harper, and Bailey. I don't see the Celtics moving on from Brown to add one of them, give them a year to develop, and sure, that might extend the window, but you don't know how well these players are going to pan out when they're prospects. The Ace Bailey could be the next Josh Jackson for all we know. It's just not a risk that the Celtics need to make. I think just adding players, and it's a real focus on building the rotation, and each player has a significant way and complementary style that works alongside players like Brown and Tatum. That's the types of players you're looking for, and you're going to be looking for a team that looks like the Oklahoma City Thunder or one of these teams that is head to toe with depth. 13 deep, you'd feel confident with putting any of them out there for 15 to 20 minutes. That's what the Celtics are exactly going to be looking for, and it's going to be with Jaylen Brown at the helm. And I think if you put the right team around Jaylen Brown and you The way the team sits right now, I still think that if the Celtics went through this offseason without making a single move, addition, and or just re-signed all the players they have, they could go into next year not looking like they're out of the window and they're in the lottery area. They would still be within the middle of the pack, if not play-in tournament. And once the Celtics reach the play-in tournament, I would still feel confident. But I don't see this team going worse than the rock bottom they already hit. And I think that you're just going to be seeing them turn a corner, and it's really just. My only question is like, how much does next year matter to the Boston Celtics already at this point on June 12th? How much does next season matter to the Celtics? Are you going to risk trading away your dynamic one half of your dynamic duo to bring in a 36, 37-year-old Kevin Durant? I don't think so. Nor do I think that would even help out with a championship. Are you going to trade for a Giannis? But I would have to separate the heart out of it and everything, but there's not too much of a difference, and I'm sure the Celtics would have to give up something extra if they were to be trading for Giannis, which absolutely not worth it. The Celtics need to maintain their draft picks. They need to hold through their future. Will Chisholm is not going to allow this to be a one-year venture. Oh, look at me, I won a championship in my first year as the owner. No, he's going to look to continue to grow the legacy and dynasty of the Boston Celtics.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Bill Chisholm, and that's certainly a very important point in all of this is Jaylen Brown. I mean, he's a staple athlete in Boston. And, talk about the emotional connection. It's like for some of these trades, how Durant is so nonsensical. It's like Durant is not happening. Giannis is more
we're
realistic to
entertaining
me.
it for the clip. For the clicks.
Right. We can entertain the conversation, but it's nonsensical.
Yes.
We can explain why it's nonsensical and have the conversation, but bottom line, totally, the Durant trade is not going to happen. Giannis, on the other hand, is a little more viable, way more viable in my mind. It would just entail a lot more cap gymnastics. It would entail cap gymnastics with Durant,
and the Celtics would be still in the same position that they are right now. If anything,
no. If the Celtics traded for Giannis, number one, the roster would look different.
I'm talking about financially. They're
right.
If they were to add another one, if anything, they're going to try to lower that salary cap. They're not going to try to bring in Giannis, who's making MVP money, to play next to more MVP money. That's the last thing that you're going to see out of the Celtics team is them continuing to go above that apron.
Well, but for Giannis, you can make the argument like you do that for Giannis, and if you have Giannis on the roster, and I believe I was talking about this on the Celtics Nation Rise podcast, it's if you have Giannis on the roster, right? That roster is all of a sudden expected to compete. So next season, if you trade for Giannis this offseason, if you're the Celtics, next season all of a sudden becomes, oh, you're expected to win the title, even without Tatum. Because you have Giannis. If Giannis is on your team, he wants to compete. He wants to win the title, and that's the bottom line of Giannis right now. Giannis is going into his 30s. I'm the whole Jaylen Brown Giannis thing is interesting to me from the standpoint of I don't think we would be getting like if you're saying contractually, Giannis owns a lot more value on his contract than Jaylen Brown because Jaylen Brown he's owed $65 million 4 years from now. And I was talking two things earlier, right? Two things I mentioned with Jaylen Brown. With the 65 million. If you're paying somebody 65 million in 28-29, right, which is 4 seasons from now. 4 seasons. 28-29 is 4 seasons from now. Jaylen Brown's owed $65 million. If you're paying a player $65 million 4 seasons from now, you want to know two things about that player. You want to know, number one, are they a top 15 player and will they sustain that? And number two, are they going to be healthy enough? And that comes with the sustainability as well.
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown can't give you either right now. Think about
That's
that.
what
He cannot give
that's
you
what
either.
this.
He cannot guarantee you that he's going to be top 15, top 20 next year. And I'll say this, if you're getting somebody at 65 million, you probably want him top 5, 10, 15, right? Jaylen Brown, we don't know if he's going to be in that 15 to 20 range again next year. That's where he was to me this year. I don't really like ranking players because players just fill so many different roles, and it's really hard to compare somebody like Zach Edey to a guy like Keontae George. They just do two completely different things, right? But in terms of where he's at in the star importance, right? The importance of stars, the ladder in that. I think the ladder changes every playoff run. Like these playoffs, it's the same. It's Shea, it's Tyrese Halliburton, Brunson, those guys, right? Anthony Edwards. But that that ladder, right? If Jaylen Brown is not, I don't think he's guaranteed to be in that top 10, 15, top 10 in the future.
Not
He's not even
guaranteed.
guaranteed to be in the
He needs to
top
prove it
15
this
to
year.
20. You can't guarantee that from Jaylen Brown. And then secondarily, hurts his knee. He comes into the season visibly in, this is what's crazy, in the best shape of his life, but yet overweight. It's like overweight for basketball activities, but in the best shape of his life. And that led to injuries at the end of the season. Will he be able to maybe shape his physique in the future differently to avoid some of those injuries? You cannot guarantee that with Jaylen Brown. Considering he had to go through a meniscus surgery in which they removed part of his meniscus, wasn't a repair, wasn't a natural. He didn't decide to naturally heal that meniscus over time. The rest, right, the rest and heal process has his part of his meniscus removed. Already dealing with that. We don't know if arthritis is a thing. Arthritis, hear about arthritis. I mean, Todd Gurley diagnosed with arthritis. Felt like he was immediately out of the NFL. Played one season with the Falcons, played a small stint with the Falcons after the Rams. Out of the NFL, couldn't run anymore. Jaylen Brown, it's like you're doing even more, you're cutting even more in basketball. He cannot guarantee, we cannot guarantee, or we, Jaylen Brown, whoever perspective, there's no guarantee Jaylen Brown will be healthy going in the future. There's no guarantee he'll be a top 15 or 20 player. And that's what you want if you're trading for a $65 million guy. And that ultimately brings me to the return package for Jaylen Brown. What if the return package just what if there's an impasse between teams
There's
and the
some
Celtics when it comes to
don't
Jaylen Brown's value and what the Celtics are actually getting in
yeah,
return for Jaylen Brown? Because
and
I see that as the biggest, like
right.
I see that as the scenario right now. This surgery has affected the
And
value of Jaylen Brown, period. Because I
yes,
think teams are not going to, number one, his contract is terrible in 28, 29, $65 million that year for a player who you'd not even consider a top 10 guy now and who's injured right now 4 years before he's going to be making $65 million. There's that aspect. There's the aspect of the surgery right now. I don't really see, and this too, he's 29. Jaylen Brown's 29. He's going to go into his 30s very soon. I don't see other teams just giving away young assets. I don't really see other teams jumping at the gun, jumping at the opportunity and chance to go and trade all of their assets away for Jaylen Brown.
right.
There's another side of this that says, okay, well, Mikal Bridges, you mentioned the Nets. Seems like the Nets have to be involved in all these examples. But the Nets last year, they trade Mikal Bridges to the Knicks. They get a fine haul from Mikal Bridges. And in that playoff series, Mikal Bridges, Jaylen Brown's a better player than Mikal Bridges. It's just point blank. He's
Yeah,
he's just a better player. Okay, I understand Mikal Bridges had moments of
no debate.
outplaying every Celtics player in that Celtics Knicks playoff series, but Brown is a better player than Mikal Bridges by far. If Mikal Bridges can net multiple first round picks, why can't Brown? So there's
Right.
that perspective of that. Markets differ from year to year, what teams need and want, and how they evaluate players and what players did the year prior. Especially, considering right now we're talking about Jaylen Brown and knee surgery. We weren't talking about that with Mikal Bridges. But there's that aspect. There's also another aspect of just the return package. Like it's possible the return package might not include a player who will ever reach the same level as Jaylen Brown, which could be a fundamental problem for the Celtics. I mean, you get him at number 3 in 2016, and it's a heist after the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade. The Celtics might not get comparable talent in return for Jaylen Brown. They might not see a package in which returns the Celtics a player that ever reaches the height of where Jaylen Brown is right now. And that's where I do look at this and go, there may be an impasse between teams taking on Jaylen Brown's future salary and the Celtics in getting equal, if not more value in return in a Jaylen Brown trade. Straight up. Straight up.
Right. So yeah, teams are
Yeah.
probably calling the Celtics right now, utilizing this injury as a crutch in these trade negotiations, being like, "Oh, you're going to trade us damaged goods. We're going to take off one of these first round picks in this Jaylen Brown trade," which I don't see Brad buying the bluff on. I don't see him buying into that, and like we've said, I think this year is a really, really, really important year in the determination of how Jaylen Brown's career goes on after this. You'll see if he is able to hold water while Tatum's out. Great, we'll continue to ride on the dynamic duo of Brown and Tatum, and we'll continue to carry that on. However, if you're halfway through next year and I'm not saying trade deadline or anything, but you're looking at how he's looking and you're like, all right, now these conversations are a little bit more legitimate. I think the Celtics have developed enough trust within Jaylen Brown to not jump the gun on it and move the chess piece a move earlier, and not even explore the opportunity of what this roster looks like with Brown as the guy at the helm. So I think you'll see that, but I trade the guys that you have to look at on this roster that are almost guaranteed out the door, either contractually, physically, and or what they can just produce for the Celtics, is Holiday, Porzingis, Hauser, and Tillman, if you want to include a bottom end asset piece. But those four players are the ones that you're going to be seeing shipped off, and because those are the major dead cap players who are kind of holding the Celtics back and would withhold that win now mentality when the Celtics are trying to bridge for years to come with Tatum, and so Brown and Tatum can finish out their career with what the Celtics envisioned of multiple championships, not just one, not just two, multiple.
And don't get into the LeBron talk here. The LeBron talk. Just two. We would
Two.
like two, though. We would like two.
Oh, oh,
The second
no,
would be nice.
at this point, we'll take playoffs. We'll take a win. We'll take
Take a
Summer League.
playoff series
We'll
win
take
next year.
why not? We'll take the Summer League tournament championship.
That
We'll
would be
take
great. We almost did in 2021. Almost. So close. But I'll say, talking about, I started to go on the Bill Chisholm tangent earlier, but kind of got derailed on the whole Kevin Durant talk. I think next year, a reason to, we've been adding on reasons to why the Celtics likely won't trade Jaylen Brown. Another one of those reasons we talked about the impasse and the contract in the future, and some of the assets in which teams will actually give up for Jaylen Brown. I just don't see the assets teams are willing to give up. I don't see them going beyond what the Celtics would want for Jaylen
right.
Brown. I think there may be an impasse there. But also, you got to consider this: the emotional connection Jaylen Brown owns in Boston is a thing, and when I say emotional connection, it all has to go. It all has to do with money. It all has to go back with money because Jaylen Brown is a staple athlete in Boston and widely known and liked throughout the city. Period. We've seen that. I mean, we saw that at the pop up shop. It's really all love for Jaylen Brown, no matter where he walks on the land of Boston. But Boston needs a face of the franchise with Tatum out. They need somebody to advertise ticket sales, merchandise sales, local TV ratings. They need those to go. They need the interviews, right? They need the face to interview. They need They need somebody to advertise their product, which is the NBA, which is basketball, which is merchandise, ticket, food sales, all of that, everything. I mean, think about where all the faces are plastered. They're on the banners, on the
on
lights,
the
they're on the
polls.
poles. Exactly, like the pole. That's like the first thing I thought of, like the poles, the poles, the poles. Um,
Gogo
local team
Batadze poll.
events, sponsorships.
The,
Think,
the TD Garden Gogo Batadze poll next year will do numbers.
oh my goodness, what was the one people were all
The
they
Grant
were all
Williams.
giddy over? Was it
I,
the
I think it
Blake
was the
Griffin
Grant.
one?
I think it was the Grant Williams Mavericks. I know that was a meme from when he had his short trip over there, but everyone was. I
Oh Lord.
remember everyone was giddy about the Blake Griffin signing, which is why I will always advocate for like players who are past their primes to be signed to rosters because people were buying number 91 Blake Griffin jerseys.
I know it's kind of one of those things. The 15th roster spot's been left open, but man, you got to bring back the veterans because I do think they
Let them get their
a couple
flowers.
extra dollars over time. You sell a couple extra jerseys. They're on the bench. They might get to play. I mean, I will say one veteran I always enjoyed watching at the late stage of his career with the Memphis Grizzlies, Joakim Noah.
Like
Joakim Noah is like, what a weird jump shot. He's still a maniac out there. Still one of the better defensive centers, and
seeing Taj Gibson out on the court for the Charlotte Hornets, I'm like, good for you, man. Good for you.
that one's crazy. That one's crazy because he's done it with two different teams. I mean, he's done it with multiple teams. I mean, the Hornets, the Knicks, might have been on another team in there too, wearing the number 67. Timberwolves as well. Timberwolves were in
Yep.
there. But talking about Jaylen Brown, roping it back onto Jaylen Brown, Bill Chisholm has a lot to do with this. We don't know what the Celtics ownership is even going to do next year. Celtics ownership could come in, the new Celtics ownership led by Bill Chisholm. They could be all about spending on a roster that has no chance in the world whatsoever. And that's a legitimate, plausible scenario that plays out in time. The Celtics ownership comes in and just, we're going to spend. And, part of that spending, or I shouldn't even say part of that spending, but part of the decision making in that, it could be surrounding Jaylen Brown as a face of the franchise. Again, ticket sales, merchandise sales, local team events, the polls like we're talking about. Think about how many places the face
Love him.
is of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. That fundamentally with Tatum out, gonna need a face of the franchise. Brown is that natural face of the franchise to come in. He's right there. I mean, he's gonna come in and he's gonna play well. Or he's gonna play well in that role immediately. But I will say another there's another side of this entire conversation with Jaylen Brown and his potential and his potential. I don't want to say departure, but the Celtics moving on from Jaylen Brown, maybe. Who knows? We've asked the question of do the Celtics trade Jaylen Brown? The obvious answer is no, because of all the reasons we listed, the value of Jaylen Brown. I do like right now, I do wonder if Jaylen Brown, like what does it do to his value, the surgery in general? The obvious answer is no, because of all the reasons we listed. That said, an offer too good to refuse could always come around. That's always a possibility
Oh,
with every single
Spurs
player.
offer Dylan Harper, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy
Castle,
Sohan, Castle, and
Castle, and the number two
three.
pick would, to me, it'd be like, all right, we're really like Castle and the number two pick. It's like you got me on the phone. You have me listening. I'm intently like I'm. But here's the thing about that. Why would this like? If I'm the Spurs, I think that would be insane.
Right.
Number two and Stephon Castle, two guys who are essentially so we're talking about Dylan Harper essentially and Stephon Castle, two guys who are basically 20 years old are going to trade both of those guys, two of them, right? Both of them for a 29-year-old player who's coming off of a torn meniscus
Be
surgery
my
and you're
guest.
turned the ball over 8 times in 2023. I understand 2 years ago, but did happen. Did happen in a time where Jaylen Brown was in his prime. Just saying. But an offer too good to refuse could always come along. And, Brad listening to these deals, he wouldn't be doing his job as a GM if he wasn't listening to these. If Brad wasn't listening to these offers, he wouldn't be doing his job
Right.
as a GM, straight up. And
And
so I think the Celtics will entertain Brown deals from that perspective, just from the simple fact of they want to know what Brown's value is out of the market. But also say this: Jaylen Brown's value, where is it going to actually tilt in the next coming months, if not seasons? Because Jaylen Brown taking over the main ball handling role with the Celtics, it could make or break Jaylen Brown's stock next year, taking over the
right.
responsibilities as the number one option. I mean, it could easily break his stock to where, we have Jaylen Brown $65 million on the books 4 seasons from now. He just proved 3 seasons from that point that he can't be that guy. He's not a $65 million guy. And that could be something that plays out next season with the Celtics and Jaylen Brown. And I generally I generally dislike, gotta say that, I generally dislike all the green teamer takes out there. Brown, Tatum, they'll be back better than ever. All great. It's like, okay, I understand. People,
Better.
it's hopeful that they will return to that point, but I don't like the just hoorah, let's go Brown and Tatum. It's like it's very possible that Brown and Tatum don't come back the same number one, but Brown as the number one option next season looks like a complete mess. Looks like a complete inconsistent mess and completely tanks his value. And not only that, there's potential that he doesn't look the same from this meniscus injury. And there's a scenario out there where the Celtics get ahead of that peak value, where they go, Jaylen Brown is actually at peak value right now in this
Yep.
offseason. We don't know what he's going to look like in 2026. We don't know what he's going to look. Right now, Jaylen Brown is seen as an all-star. He's seen as an all NBA player. He's seen as a guy in his prime who's won a championship, who's won a finals MVP. Maybe after next year, maybe he's the number one guy. Maybe he just I'm saying it's potential it's a possibility Jaylen Brown makes or breaks his value next year by being the number one guy. And the Celtics could look at that and go, maybe we get ahead of this. Maybe we go out and get ahead of this. And it kind of goes in with the conversation of that maybe they already know the result of Jaylen Brown as the number one guy. And they don't need to see more next season. Just saying. But another obvious reason as to why you would consider trading Jaylen Brown is his future money. Again, I keep reiterating it. And then the big number to me is he's going to be making 60 million per the next 4 seasons, but the big number is 65 million 4 years from now. That is the big number to me. 65 million in 4 years. That is a lot of money to be paying somebody in their early 30s who's now coming off of
He would be 33 when he
right,
receives that deal.
coming off of meniscus surgery now at 28 years old, going on 29. It's possible the Celtics look to get younger, stock their pick arsenal back up, look to reset the timeline. I would say just the Celtics in general with Jaylen Brown, this could be the out this summer where you look at 65 million later on down the line. Ooh, yes, the Spurs, maybe they're dangling the second pick. Maybe we can get more assets out of them. Maybe we can get some younger assets out of another team like the Rockets. Can we get something out of the Suns or the Hawks or the Heat? Like what can we get out there anywhere out of any team? Maybe the Celtics look to find an out on Jaylen Brown's contract. Maybe they look to get a little bit younger, a little faster. Last year, the team looked a little lethargic, a little slower, a little older. Maybe the Celtics look to get a little bit younger, and maybe they look to sell high on Jaylen Brown, knowing he's 29. Who knows how much better he's actually going to get moving into the future. I think the Jaylen Brown trade conversation, looking at it in its entirety, I mean, there's a lot of reasons as to why you would both trade Jaylen Brown and not trade Jaylen Brown. And I think both reasons, both spectrums of reasoning, it's valid. It's completely valid. And I think the surgery potentially had a lot of effect on the and I would say this, the surgery and the timeline as well. The timeline of the surgery, maybe talk about the timeline of the surgery. Does Jaylen Brown get this surgery knowing, or the Celtics push Jaylen Brown towards this surgery knowing, okay, if you get the surgery now and you're going to be ready for training camp, does that actually boost his trade value knowing that he's going to be available come training camp? Because imagine, he would definitely, if he's available come training camp, he's not going to miss any time. Theoretically, you can advertise that to other teams as, Well, he's not missing any time. He'll be fully ready to go, healthy, all good for you next season. Say he's like Robert Williams, and I do want to get into Robert Williams before we hop off here. But if he's like Robert Williams and undergoes another surgery later on in time, where the timetable is 8 to 12 weeks or 6 months, something like that, that's not as you cannot pedal that as much as you can pedal. Oh, he'll be ready for training camp. You cannot say, oh well, he'll be ready for January and February and Christmas. Like he'll be ready to go. Like teams will not want that. They'll automatically you're getting less for that. You're getting less for a player who's going to be out for the first couple of weeks or even months of the season. I do wonder if that played a factor and what type of procedure Jaylen Brown got. I'm just saying. I'm just saying out here. But you know, I do wonder if the Celtics look to begin moving off of Brown at his peak value, or if you know
I'll,
in the preparation that Jaylen could tank his peak value coming back from this injury, not looking the same, or even taking over the reins next season. That's
I'll say,
possible.
yes, and probably reiterate right where all these sources are coming from, these rumors, and like I said, these rumors, I know they have their inside sources, but it's all very, very easy to poke out, and like very, if you just have like a visionary eye, you can see what is going on within trade rumors, what teams would be interested in, and who and what players and all that. So I don't know how much fabrication goes behind those, but the players there are four players right now that are much more of a priority for the Celtics to move off of this year before they move on off of Jaylen Brown. Because if you move on from Jaylen Brown, what are you going to do with the Holiday and Porzingis? Are you going to move off from them as well? You would have to. It, mo- Trading Brown would mean you would have to entirely, entirely blow up the entire roster.
That's
Like,
another aspect of just trading Jaylen Brown is you're resetting your entire timeline. Like, what do you if you're trading away Jaylen Brown and
and
getting back younger
and
talent? What
and
happens with the
Holiday and
Tatum timeline?
And Holiday and Porzingis are still sitting on your team. Like, what are you doing with that? Like, that would just lead to absolutely no direction, and it would just be them kind of sitting in the same spot, if not just sinking into that spot. And the comfortability of when Tatum comes back, you want to have a little bit of familiarity when Tatum comes back to this roster. You don't want him to come back from a whole season off and not recognize a single guy who's sitting next to him in his locker room. That is probably the last resort you want. So I think that we're to summarize, I'm very happy that Brown is going to be back for training camp. Hopefully, he uses training camp to get his legs back under him. Maybe we see him with a little bit less weight on him, but it is imperative that Jaylen Brown is ready for day one, game one of the NBA season next year, comfortable and ready with the players that are now around him, and is ready to move forward and treat next year just as he would treat last year as a championship push.
Yeah, and the whole trading Jaylen Brown conversation too is just um to me it's like again I just the contract value, it's going to be a very interesting conversation to see where it actually goes. um Thinking about what type of assets other teams would actually want to give up for a guy like Jaylen Brown, because I think Jaylen Brown has kind of become a guy that maybe is more valued by, he's like a smart. It's like he's more valued by his own team than other teams out there. Just gonna go ahead and say that. We do have a Jaylen Brown, trying to pull it up here on stream. Let's see. First of all, tried to avoid this, folks. Tried to avoid this here. Wait a minute. Well, we're gonna pull it up on stream here. First of all, this is Brown and Tatum. We showed everybody this photo earlier, but just to cover as we put this in stream here. But Jaylen Brown, let's see. We're having some technical difficulties behind the scenes here. If we can get this photo up. I don't know if we're going to be able to get this photo up. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties behind the scenes. But long story short, Jaylen Brown is in this uh, chamber looking thing. Franco, I don't know if you want to try to pull this up on stream or not. I'm going to send it to you. You can go ahead and put it in there if you could do that. I don't know if on my end.
Unfortunately, I'm not on the iPhone, so I can't. I would have to. I haven't even. That's beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, I don't know. We're having some technical. You know what? I can show this on the iPad. Let's see. Let me just try to show it on the iPad.
Yeah.
Let's do it old school. Let's do it old school. Come on now. This is okay. Here we go. Look, this was supposed to be pulled up on stream, but we're having a couple of technical See, here's the thing. So on the iPad, I'm getting no healthy upstream right now, and on my phone, I'm getting error messages all over the place. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull up the iPad here. Here's Jaylen Brown. And he's in this little chamber.
The Bane Cairo chamber.
Yep.
Yep. They're Tatum and Brown are just in the Cairo chambers, just loading up for next year. If Brown can come back as the player that we know he is capable of being, we are going to see that the value that we've always seen and advocated for him to be a top 15, top 10 talent on this roster is this is his shot for it. So I'm very excited for what training camp brings and also what who he's going to be working with during that first training camp practice.
Yeah, and also this is another photo. Again, technical difficulties here, folks, on the live. Can't pull these up on stream for some reason right now, but here's Jaylen Brown's leg in a wrap as well. So this is Griffin pointed out earlier, and I noticed as well the all-star shorts here for Jaylen Brown wearing it with the wrap. Here's the iPad. So had to show it on the iPad.
That
Some
must be
technical
sweet.
difficulties here.
They get to keep the shorts, and that's sweet.
I know, right? That's what I was thinking. I'm like, he just wears those shorts normally, and then that's him in the
that's like
chamber,
that's Jaylen Brown's regular gym apparel. That's his morning jog shorts, his All-Star game shorts. That's pretty sweet.
Just this photo looks like a billionaire photo. I'm sorry, this one, just like he's getting some. You ever see Spider-Man, like the Green Goblin? He's
that's Batman
whole,
Bane. Bane.
Right. Well, yeah, Bane as well. Definitely from Batman, and
You feel like you're in charge.
But I do want to address this here before we pop on out of here because okay, so just kind of skimming. I always do this at the end. You gotta skim through notes. Gotta skim through notes to make sure you don't miss anything here. I do want to get into a story. That's kind of gonna wrap us up here, but I want to get into kind of a explainer here between Robert Williams and Jaylen Brown because there's been a lot of conversation out there about Robert Williams and Jaylen Brown and how this Jaylen Brown injury connects to Robert Williams's injury a couple of years ago in 2022 going into 2023 with the Celtics and how that can all relate because Robert Williams initially. So hearing torn meniscus, Celtics Nation, they immediately reminisce back on Robert Williams' experience with dealing with the torn meniscus back in 2022. So just hearing the word torn meniscus, hearing the phrase torn meniscus, Celtics Nation rise, not Celtics Nation rise, Celtics Nation I mean, hey, Celtics Nation, rise up. I don't know. But Celtics Nation, they always, I should say, hearing meniscus tear, Celtics Nation, they reminisce back to Robert Williams' experience in dealing with the torn meniscus back in 2022. Robert Williams' career after that meniscus tear was never quite the same. Never quite the
I mean,
same after
and
sustaining a torn
he's still
meniscus.
young. We still haven't even seen him bounce
He's
back fully
27.
healthy
I
yet.
mean, he's
Yeah,
27. He's unfortunately missed
four,
the last two
3.
seasons. He's missed pretty important career years in my mind, 26 and 27. But that's the
Hopefully
point here is
hopefully he makes a recovery. I want to see him have a fully healthy season.
But Williams, his career was never quite the same after sustaining a torn meniscus in March of 2022. However, Robert Williams, he tore his meniscus on March 27th, 2022. He had the surgery on March 30th, so 3 days later, 2 days later, depending on how you count it. He missed 9 games in 26 days, and he recovered for about 23, 24 days if you want to count the surgery day or not as a recovery day. But about 23 days of recovery, which if you look back is just insane. Robert Williams, the type of player he was, jumping out of the gym, jumping from the rafters, how like he tore his meniscus. They go ahead, and he's somebody too. He went through the surgery of removal, the removal of the meniscus. It wasn't a repair, it's the removal, and it wasn't the natural healing process either. They removed part of the meniscus right away. That 3 days later after the injury, he only recovers for 23 days before coming back in game 3 of the first round against the Brooklyn Nets in 2022. And then Robert Williams, he returned game 3 against Brooklyn. He missed 7 of the Celtics' 22 playoff games in 2022. So 7 games missed in the playoffs. So he came back in game 3. He missed 9 games, 7 games at the end of the regular season, 2 to start the playoffs. Then he misses another 5 after that in the next 20 games. And through that time, just didn't look the same. Didn't look the same whatsoever. Didn't have the same lift or explosiveness. Didn't get off the ground well. Didn't get up and down the floor well. I mean, he was very hobbled the entirety of the finals and just didn't look like Robert Williams. He was always laboring to get up and down the floor. Just did not look the same. And looking back, that's just insane. The type of player he was, the jumping from the rafters, jumping uh, uh,
I still see the potential in him. I still think it's in there.
The verticality in Robert Williams, the leaping ability out of Robert Williams, that type of player to only rest him 23 days before bringing him back after meniscus surgery, after a removal of the like not full removal obviously, but shaving away of the meniscus is crazy work. We talk about the Celtics good medical staff. It's like I think it's like these guys are kind of just puppets to the ownership at the end of the day. It's like whatever ownership wants and wants to hear,
Yeah.
that's what
Why
the
do
doctor's
you
going to
think
put
they
out. I
had
mean,
Kristaps
I hate to say it,
Porzingis?
but we already saw what happened.
Yeah.
Well, I won't say it. I won't say it about doctors right now. I won't say anything about
Yeah.
other
I mean, look
events.
at KP. He was a sick dog. He was like a dying dog out on the court during that whole entire New York Knicks series. And like, all I wanted to do is bring him out back like old Yeller. Like, I just
What's funny is it's like both fan bases probably felt like that with Porzingis at a certain point in time.
and
Straight
honestly,
up.
I bet you Porzingis probably felt like that having to be out on the court dealing with that.
But the medical teams, they are just puppets of the organization. They're gonna they're like, oh, this player, you want him to play? Like, look at the Clippers and Kawhi. There's a whole lawsuit going on. I don't know if it's ongoing still or not, but as of last year, there was a lawsuit going on that essentially outlined the fact the Los Angeles Clippers completely neglected the health of Kawhi Leonard in order to increase his availability on court. That's what happened in LA. And
And
it's all
teams
in a
were
lawsuit. Everybody can go read it out there. It's public record out in Los Angeles, out in Orange County. But talking about Robert Williams here and just comparing him to Jaylen Brown. Now, Robert Williams, this is the story of Robert Williams. He needed another surgery on his knee on September 23rd, 2022. And I remember over across this room right here, I was doing a live with Ian and Justin. We were talking about Robert Williams and his knee health and everything. And then boom, notification comes out. Robert Williams undergoes surgery. Right as we're on live, about 10, 15 minutes after we had talked about him and his knee. But after that moment, And I will say he needed that surgery to address continued swelling and discomfort in his knee. And it put him out 8 to 12 weeks to start the 22-23 season. So Robert Williams tears his meniscus 3 days later, undergoes surgery in March of 2022, misses 23 days, misses 26 days, 9 games in a row, comes back, doesn't look the same, misses games here and there all throughout the playoffs, hobbled on court, and then in the offseason receives another surgery later on in time in September. Think about this timeline. He was off from June, July, August, needed a surgery in September to address the swelling in his knee, the discomfort in his knee, and then of course he misses the first he was out 8 to 12 weeks and he missed the start of the 22-23 season. Since that point, Robert Williams has only appeared in 81 NBA games in 3 seasons.
Wow.
81 NBA games. And he played a total of 76 games during that 21-22 season with the Celtics when the Celtics made it all the way to the finals. Robert Williams played a total of 76 games, 15 in the playoffs, and then 61 in the regular season, 61 in the regular season, then 15 in the playoffs. Since that point, Robert Williams has only appeared in 81 games in 3 seasons, including the playoffs. And what gets worse is Williams appeared in 35 of 82 games in 22-23, played every single playoff game in 2023, every single one, all 20 playoff games. So positive mark there. However, since the Celtics traded Robert Williams to Portland in the Drew Holiday deal, traded Robert Williams away to the Portland Trailblazers, Williams has only appeared in 26 of the 164 games the Portland Trailblazers have played over the last 2 seasons. 26 games. So certainly Robert Williams has not looked the same at all since that meniscus injury. That being said, the Robert Williams meniscus injury, to me, that didn't have everything to do with the timeline of Robert Williams not being available for the Blazers or the Celtics from 2022 to the current day. It's not just the meniscus injury. And this is what I want to make clear for Celtics Nation here. Is that everybody out there is comparing Robert Williams, Jaylen Brown. Oh my goodness, we already went through this with Robert Williams. This is terrible. This is a disaster. He's never going to be the same.
Completely.
They're two different players, two different circumstances. Number one, Robert Williams and Jaylen Brown are physically built different. Jaylen is a little more firm with more muscle mass. His base generally looks more stable than Robert Williams. Robert Williams always kind of looked a little noodly to me. A little top heavy, a little, his bottom half
I
wasn't.
will give him this. In person, he is obviously compared to my little 6-foot spot. But he's like, when I met him, he was a lot more thick, filled out than I expected him to be.
Robert Williams?
Yes.
Well, I'll say this. I don't know if you met Jaylen Brown, but Jaylen Brown just seemed like,
Jaylen
to
Brown
me, he
landed on
seems a
me.
little stronger than Robert Williams. Like his muscle mass is a little more firm. Like Jaylen Brown's a little more firm. He's a little more athletic, a little more coordinated within all of his body parts, right?
But
He's
Williams
built
is
differently.
definitely stronger.
Yeah, and his
Williams is-
physique. It's just it's about the physique. You wouldn't compare, Zubac to Chris Paul. They have completely different physiques. And that's the same conversation with Brown and Robert Williams, Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams. I mean, their physiques are just different. That's number one. Number two, Robert Williams, he deals with this condition called PAES. I don't know if they call it PAES or if it's just the acronym, but PAES. And that's a condition, an artery condition in which constricts blood flow from behind the knee to the lower leg. So we learned about this, and this is not something that's been reported over time. It's just been one of those tidbits that people come up with Robert Williams talking about his injury. But when the Celtics drafted Robert Williams, people forget Robert Williams was supposed to be a lottery pick. He's supposed to be a lottery pick on draft night of 2018. Fell all the way to 27 to the Celtics. We're asking questions. Why? Why did that happen? What's going on here? We thought the first couple of days, Robert Williams, he missed his press conference call. We thought it could be maturity issue. We don't know here. But then it comes out, he's dealing with this artery condition that constricts blood flow to his lower legs. that's kind of a major red flag in a
Right.
7-foot big man who jumps out of the building and jumps from the rafters. That's kind of a concern. And it was always known with Robert Williams, this is kind of a ticking time bomb. Like we know this man is never going to be sustainably healthy for the long term. We knew it. We knew it in his rookie year. We knew it. And that's the thing is that
That's
the
why he
Celtics.
slipped to us. That's why he slipped to us. He was going to be he was a projected lottery pick, top 12, I believe, and he slipped all the way down to 26. Or I think it was 20, it was in between 25 and 30.
Exactly. And this too is that, the difference between Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams. The Celtics rarely ramped up Robert Williams' minutes. Williams only averaged over 25 minutes per game in one of his 7 NBA seasons so far. He's only averaged over 25 minutes per game in one of his 7 NBA seasons, which is crazy to think
That's
he's now 7
ridiculous.
years into the league.
That's not.
Just in like crazy to think about. But one of the 7 seasons, he's only averaged over 25 minutes in. He played 14.7 minutes per game from 2018-19, which was his rookie season, to 2021. So in the first 3 years of his career, Robert Williams played 14.7 minutes per game, which is incredible to think about considering that was the number on his per year of his extension. So he plays 14.7 minutes per game the first 3 seasons, and then he gets 50, I forgot the exact number, but he basically got 12, 13, 14 million per year for 4 years, which again, 14 minutes, that's pretty efficient making money out there in the NBA. That being said,
$1 million
Robert
per
Williams,
minute of
they
game.
they gave him that extension. The Celtics, they gave him that extension. They went, all right, with this extension, you're gonna have to live up to this extension. Robert Williams played 29.6 minutes per game in 21-22 in that regular season. And when the Celtics ramped up Robert Williams's minutes, Williams tore his meniscus and needed surgery. And he hasn't quite been the same since. So you look at that. Jaylen Brown has a long track record of health, availability, and heavy minutes. That, for one, could be looked at as
A positive.
JB owns a proven history versus an unproven history in Robert Williams. Could also be looked at, Rob mentioned this earlier, a lot of wear and tear on Jaylen Brown's body. Could also be looked at in that way. This, too, the Celtics arguably, I mean, we already talked about it. They arguably rushed Robert Williams back to the court in the 2022 playoffs without him being fully healthy. That could have 100% exacerbated any knee issues he had initially and into the future, and could have caused this time period where he's not playing on court. Maybe he doesn't play that playoff run, and maybe he's better for the foreseeable future in his career. Again, we brought it up. Only recovered for about 23 days after surgery. That's, I mean, just looking back at it, that is beyond the borderline of insane. That is the definition of insanity, is doing something like that as an organization and expecting a player to be healthy long term. That's, to me, the Celtics received the best season out of Robert Williams he's ever going to have in the NBA. That was 21-22. Straight up. That's sometimes how you got to look at these players. But Robert Williams was never consistently available in his first 3 seasons of his career before playing 61 games in the regular season in 21-22. And that was seen as a lot for Robert Williams, 61 games. Played 61 regular season games, and I mentioned earlier 76 if you include the 17. Was it, no, it was 16, 15 playoff games, 15 playoff games. If you include the 15 playoff games onto the 61, it's 76, but 61, that was seen as a lot for Robert Williams. That's not seen as a lot for Jaylen Brown. I mean, he's kind of expected to get to about 60 games. Got to 63 this past season, and that was with the meniscus injury at the end of the year. If he doesn't sustain that injury, probably getting upwards of 70. He's done that multiple times in his career. I should say, getting over 50 games, 60 games. So Jaylen Brown has a long track record of being a lot more healthy and durable than Robert Williams. And to me, the circumstances are completely different. Robert Williams, different physique. He's dealing with the artery condition in his legs. The timeline's different. The history, the minutes, the games played, everything is different from Robert
Yeah.
Williams to Jaylen Brown. To compare the two is they're almost uncomparable to me.
Right.
It's almost
incomparable,
uncomparable.
and it's just
Incomparable, whatever you want to say.
I just don't know where, like, Robert Williams. I hopefully that's the only comparison I can draw from this, and the only thing I can draw from the Robert Williams injury from the Jaylen Brown injury is we've seen as a watching the Celtics, we've seen a young player in Robert Williams get pushed through one of those meniscus injuries during a playoff run just to hold it off until that off season. And now look what boat Robert Williams is in. And now we're waiting for him to even make a full recovery if he even can.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Jaylen Brown right now. It's that playoff run. I almost look at it and go, wow. I understand we had aspirations of winning back to back titles, but that could have you know
If he sat on the couch during that entire playoff run, and right when they diagnosed that injury, they said Jaylen Brown is out with a torn meniscus, that would have sucked in the moment, but we would have probably been much more in a better
confident in his
position
ability
and
to recover
confident.
going ahead into the
Yeah,
future than
yeah,
if he didn't have an entire
1000%.
playoff run where he played 36.6 minutes per night
And
on his
then had to
resume.
almost try to carry a team back from being down 3-1 in a round 2 against the New York Knicks.
And I'll say this too, with Jaylen Brown. Like, I wonder if this whole injury situation in the end of the season, how it went, because it's not only one of those things that, it's in the news, but it's also in the public eye because we saw it on court. I do wonder if this surgery, we're talking about, the Jaylen Brown trade aspect. I wonder if the surgery affects how the Celtics and other teams evaluate Brown as an asset and value just him in general moving forward. Because that's the thing with Robert Williams. He even afterwards he was seen as an asset within that Drew Holiday move. I wonder, does the surgery, how does that affect Jaylen Brown as an asset moving forward? Kind of more on the trade part, the trade conversation with Jaylen Brown in general. But I know we are talking about Robert Williams here and that whole story timeline. It's just an incomparable. Uh, they're two incomparable uh, stories and timelines to me because it's just there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of differences
Right.
between Robert Williams and Jaylen Brown, and I think Jaylen Brown, I believe he has more of a chance to
One,
overcome this injury than Robert Williams, who, like, to me, Jaylen Brown talked about earlier some ways that Jaylen Brown could overcome the injury. Getting a little lighter, getting a little bit more physical, maybe becoming a little better of a playmaker, becoming a more paced player out there, playing with his
I bet
own
you the Celtics are going
pace,
to document
shooting,
I bet you the Celtics are
a
going to
lot of shooting.
document their if well, the Celtics social media team is great, but I guarantee that they're going to do like some type of documentation and like document the recovery of Brown and Tatum, because very rarely will you see two star players of one team out with an injury rehabbing during an off season. That will, I'm sure. I mean, if the Celtics PR team is listening right now, get those cameras in that training room, because that would be one hell of a episode of a series, watching those guys come back from what they have went through. And
They have cameras on them right now. They
oh
do.
yeah,
I
I'm
mean, they
just
always have cameras nowadays. It's like, oh, let's document our entire. Like, why wouldn't you? Like today, like
right.
if you had the money, if you had the cameras, and especially time, it's like, and these guys, let's face it, they have time. It's like, we're not stupid. All they do is play basketball. It's like all they do is train, play basketball. It's like they have to do something else. They have time. Because that's what always KD would always talk about that. It's like most of the time NBA players are just sitting around playing Xbox. Like it's like they go to practice and they play Xbox and they don't even practice. Like they practice individually, but you know what I mean. Like not as a
Yeah,
team. As a team throughout the regular season, there's practice, but it's not quite
right.
it's not quite consistent in the regular season. Um, I do want to mention a couple more things here. With Jaylen Brown in general. I will just say Jaylen Brown is going to be 29 by the start of next season. Obviously, he's going to be ready to go by training camp. But one just hopes that Jaylen Brown doesn't need more procedures in the future, like Robert Williams. We're just talking about Robert Williams. Robert Williams, that whole thing, That we should have been way. I mean, we were probably. I mean, we were concerned, but in 2022, like the alarm bells for him in September, when you're waiting 3 4 months in the off season and then needing surgery again to address swelling and discomfort, that's not a good thing. Jaylen Brown, we're hoping that he doesn't need more procedures in the future because we already talked about it. He went through that basically the removal surgery, the shaving of the meniscus, and essentially, the shaving of the meniscus. And we've touched on it during this broadcast here. But the shaving of the meniscus in general, I mean, the arthroscopic debridement knee surgery, it likely entails, obviously the the removal, partial removal of the meniscus, but what it also entails is, there's going to be less shock absorbing padding within Jaylen Brown's knee, which could exacerbate the risk of future issues, including arthritis. And we talked about that. Todd Gurley, he was in the NFL, and all of a sudden he's not in the NFL because he can't run anymore because his bones are scraping together in his knee. That's the concern with the meniscus, is it's that padding, right? Let's bring up these again. It's the padding in the knee. I mean, just look at the anatomy of the knee. You have your kneecap there, the patella, you have your femur, that's your thigh bone up there, and then your shin bone, your tibia, which I should have read that earlier on this program, but hey, better late than never. The meniscus is the padding between those two bones. I mean, that's a big thing in the knee. It's a big thing. If you shave it away, it's fundamental. Those two bones are going to rub together and it's going to hurt. I'm sure a lot of old men out there, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Uh,
I know exactly. I know my
I'm
dad
I'm
knows exactly what
I'm
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 talking
20.
about right now.
I'm
I'm
22
glad I
going on.
don't. I can't experience. I have not experienced that pain, but
It's not fun.
right
When I have to when I've been sitting in this chair for now officially 2.5 hours. When I stand up from this chair, there will be a very large grunt, and I will have to stand there and touch my toes and do a quick squat for about 5 to 10 minutes after the show is over. No, knee problems are no fun. I'm 22 going on 50 at this point in my life.
Yeah, you got to keep them knees healthy.
Yeah,
You got to stretch, ice them out. You want to keep the crazy activities down, right? You got to go on walks every now and then. Basketball. I gotta say, I love basketball. Basketball is just extremely straining on the knees. Extremely straining on. I never quite had knee problem. Well, I don't know. I guess you have when you play basketball, you have every
everyone.
problem ever.
Yeah,
It's like every problem. You can find a story. It's like if you play basketball over time, you can find stories of, "Oh, I had a hip injury here, or knee injury." Like you just have them over time, and you see that with NBA players, and you see that at your local YMCA. I'll
yeah.
say that. Um, I don't. Let's see. Sifting through notes here. Um, I just the ending question of all this, really, in my mind, what level can Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum realistically get back to? And really, the more
Championship.
major question: do younger teams pass the Celtics and younger stars pass Tatum and Brown now that they're both out? And when they both return, will they both be the
Sure.
same? That's just the massive question with
Yep.
this moving into the future. I mean, we talked about the trade implications, the value. Jaylen Brown is the number one guy, everything here, but it's just what will these two guys look like moving into the future? If they don't look like how they did in the last couple of years, Celtics are in trouble. Those are two
Yep.
supermax guys who we've seen supermax deals. If that's the bad part about supermax deals. On one hand, supermax deals are great because guys get paid, they get to stay in their market. Teams, fans, those fans within the market get to see their players stay. That's the big draw. Like That's why the supermax exists. The NBA introduced that for players who essentially like it's illogical for a team, or not for a team, for a player to move teams via free agency now. Like star players are not moving teams via free agency anymore because they
No.
make more money by signing a supermax extension 1 year ahead of free agency with the team in which they're playing for. And that was the whole conversation with Luca, is when he was traded, because he moved teams, because he moved markets, he was ineligible for that Supermax deal. So he lost a ton of money by that trade alone. I'm sure he actually gained a lot from playing with the Lakers and now being a member of the Lakers organization. But in terms of his actual contract, he lost a lot of money. So those supermaxes are supposed to keep players in their market. But we also see is players like to force their way out. That's kind of the new thing. It's like they sign
Yeah.
the super, like Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard. We all see it. Durant. Um, but the supermax, the problem is too. You see these players like Russell Westbrook, John Wall. Trying to come up with another good one. I'm sure
Kemba,
there's Kemba.
Sports.
I mean, but Kemba wasn't a super max. He was just a normal max. But even then, max players, super max doesn't really matter. Brown and Tatum are super max guys, so it brings it up to a whole nother level. But if you're not up to that standard as a player and you're owed a super max, teams aren't going to want to trade for you. You're just not a trade piece. Like teams aren't vying for Damian Lillard right now. They never vied for John Wall. They never vied for Russell Westbrook when they were under the Supermax deals. I mean, it's just not happening. It's just not happening. So if the Celtics, if they have two Supermax guys and they're not up to that standard, it's like, yeah, Celtics could be in trouble. Or you could look
Yep.
at this on the other hand and go, well, Jalen, Jason, they'll be back. They'll be back. They'll be amazing. They'll be fine, like every green teamer out there.
Yep.
And I hope that happens. I really do. But the fact that people won't even acknowledge that this thing can go sideways,
More
it
likely
certainly needs
than
to be
not.
said. We're going to bring that reality to people throughout the summer on Celtics Talk
Yes.
Weekly, for certain. For certain. But Franco, any last thoughts on this Jaylen Brown surgery before we close off here?
I mean, looking at both these players in a vacuum when looking at these injuries, I'm without a doubt confident that both these players can return. Obviously, it's hard to say that a player is going to be able to return to the player they were once before, or if not better. But I think these two injuries kind of are the signifying part of you are looking at the peak of these players, and it's not going to be. You're not going to be seeing these players rise up any higher in stock levels unless they continue to win. But really, it's not really about these two players that are injured, Brown and Tatum. It's all about getting them back to full health. But you have to control the uncontrollable with the Celtics, and you need to be able to put players in place that can withhold if the reality is there that you don't have either your two best players on opening night.
Is the music playing right now? Is that do you
No.
hear it? It's not. It says it's playing on my end. I don't know.
I can make that happen.
I know. No. I wasn't trying to hit it. I was going to.
I know what I did. I fade it. I'm a radio. I'm radio boy.
I'm wondering. What if
I
we just
fade
the whole live we've had it on? We just have no idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can't hear it on my end.
Yeah. Now it's on and it's up to the level. But yeah, radio boy. I fade in and out music.
But of course, with the music going, it'll come back here in a second. It'll come back, folks. It'll come back. Ramp up here. There it goes. With the music going now, that is going to do it for us here on CTW Live. Covering a little bit of a somber topic today with Jaylen Brown and his meniscus injury, going through surgery. We already knew about the meniscus injury, already knew about Jason Tatum's Achilles injury, but then the surgery news had to come out after the injuries, and now we get both of those surgery news. And now, moving into the future, we'll just have to, unfortunately, we'll have to evaluate Brown and Tatum when they actually come back on court. For Brown, training camp next year. Tatum, maybe October of 2026. However, a big offseason awaits us in between that time, and we will be here for you guys during the timeline, the time period of the 2025 offseason on CTW Live and all of our great programs on the CTW network. However, that is going to do it for us here today. I am your host, Seamus Zarlingo, alongside of me, Nick Franco. As always, thank you all for watching, and go Celtics.